Today I'm going to be testing out Unison's Landscape set. It's a 16 half pastel set, which is a really affordable way to start. And I'm just going to see what I can do with just these. I do have the rest of my pastels with me if I really need them, but I'm going to try and restrict myself to this wee palette here and see how I get on. Today I'm a short distance out of town along the cycle route, past the old airfield, and I'm looking towards a large dune. If we haven't met before, I'm Pamela Ruddy, an artist on the northeast coast of Scotland in the UK. I love to go outdoors, be inspired by nature, and bring a bit of it indoors through creating art. I start out by sketching the dune in front of me. I choose a composition with the gorse in the foreground because they're in full bloom at this time of year, and it's nice to include something seasonal or transient that captures the moment in time. It's going to be a small study, so there's not going to be room to be too fussy about the details. When it comes to blocking colours, I'm starting with a blue sky. I generally work from the top and most distant part of the scene, forwards towards the foreground. Sorry about my arm getting in the way here. I'm trying to keep the board steady as I work on it. Then I gently suggest the light cloud. I started on the mid-ground grass first, just because I was a little indecisive about which colour in my limited palette to use as the darker shades under the dune grasses on the main dune. In the end, I ended up using the same colour. I think ideally if it had a larger selection of colours, I would have picked a more sagey, slightly darker tone than this. But the other options seemed too dark or too warm. I didn't really want to bring the dune too far forward. I was trying to create depth in the painting. I used a darker green to block in where the gorse bushes will go. And then I blended out the colours on the dune a little to create a darker base so that when I build up with the lighter colours for the grasses, that they show up well. Next, I put in the fence posts. It's a bit difficult to be accurate with the white soft pastels on this size of drawing. Ideally, you would use a pastel pencil or a sharp shard of soft pastel to do this kind of work. But I think I got the impression of them. I re-establish the darks where the distant gorse bushes will be. Then I try to start on the dune grass, but I'm finding it difficult to get the impression of the grass. It's difficult to know how impressionist to be with it. I can't do fine detail at this scale with these size pastels. Moving on to the paths, I use a warm tan to mark out where they go. To begin with, I'm just trying to place them. Later, I'll bring in some shadows and so that they don't just look flat and drawn on top. Building up shadow and form is what I'm trying to do with the gorse bushes too. I want the one in the foreground to be darker than those in the background to emphasise the distance between them. Next, I tried to bring in the conifer tree at the side. I liked how it helped to frame the dune, but I struggled a bit because the colours and values were really similar to what was behind it, and it was difficult to make it stand out and look different. I ended up exaggerating the differences so it wouldn't get lost. Here I'm looking for highlights and shadows on the paths up the dune, and I'm having another attempt at that grass. I define the branches of the conifer tree to try and make it look more like a conifer tree. then smudge it up a bit to soften it. I don't want to draw attention away from the dune, just frame the scene. Now I get to add in the bold yellows of the gorse, a bit muted in the distance and stronger in the nearest bush. Then I'm just trying to look at the scene as a whole and see if there's any areas that stand out to me as needing a little touching up here and there to improve it. Overall, I'm happy with that as a little study. I think some of the colour choices could have been more realistic if I'd used my full set of pastels. But maybe if I'd spent a bit longer trying to blend some of the colours together, I could have approximated that. Working with a more limited palette like this, it certainly makes you more thoughtful about which colours you're going to pick, and having to decide maybe to pick something for its value, like how dark or light it is, rather than its hue, like how red or blue or green or yellow it is. I found this definitely in a few situations where the darker green was a closer colour match, but it was just too dark to be putting in the distance. To get a reasonable sense of whether these colours would work for me as a basic set, I'll need to take it out into other kinds of landscapes that I do. Obviously, this particular one of the dune is going to have much different balances of colour compared to one which had the sea and the waves, one which is in the countryside, one which is in the hills. So it'd be interesting to see how this wee set performs in those situations, because it would be handy to have a little travel set when I can't take out all my art supplies, to have a little travel set to work on small studies like this. And in general, half sticks are a really affordable way to start a pastel collection, because you can get a much wider selection of colours for the same cost. If you'd like to join me for more art inspired by nature, watch another video and make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss new episodes. Then go outdoors, be inspired and create.